So I just want to cover this in a little bit more detail. Kite care. There are 3 things that your kite hates. Sun, sand, wind. Which is pretty unfortunate. Okay, if you live in the UK, the sun's not so much of a problem, but you're still going to have to suffer with the sand and the wind. Okay, we've already talked about the wind. The major degrader of kites is the wind. When you leave your kite out, most people when they come down the beach, right, I've only got a limited time to go kite surfing, don't know what the wind's going to do, I'll pump up all 3 kites, take one, leave the other 2 in case the wind changes. Well, what you're doing is those 2 kites that are left on the beach, as the wind is playing over them, playing over the trailing edge, that trailing edge is degrading. And when I see this on the beach, I just see euros, just see pounds, dollars, whatever you want to see, flowing out of the back of the kite, because that's generally what you're doing. You are destroying that kite. So if you're going to have to do this, 2 things you can do. Really secure the kite with sand. Now, when I say this, what I mean is take the struts, push them down, put tons of sand on top of the kite so that trailing edge all along the back is immobile. Then what I would do, because by doing that you tend to raise the leading edge up and the wind can get underneath it, stick your board fins up on top of the leading edge. So it just holds the leading edge down, but that stops the wind from playing over the kite, which is a major cause of problem. What we do when we have a lunch break, we just deflate the leading edge, roll the kite along the struts, so it's still fairly easy to pump up, so it's half taken down, then stick a board on top of it to keep it out of the sun. Because obviously even if you're putting the sand on the kite, the sun, the UV, is still going over the kite, which will degrade the material of the kite again. So sun, wind, 2 big things. Wind is the big one. Wind is the big. If you can take it out of the wind, you will add hours, days, weeks to the length of your kite, the lifetime of your kite. And as we already said, walking up the beach with the kite flapping behind you, especially in strong winds, that's the worst thing. That's the worst thing for kites, because you're adding to the volume of the wind, and the kite is doing, there's no security on the kite, it's just flapping behind you. And again, dollars, pounds just flowing out the back of it. So be aware of that one. Again, if you can fly the kite, fly the kite. Or pack it down, roll it up and carry it back. Again, much better. Okay. Wind we've talked about, sun we've talked about. Sun will degrade your kite at the slightest opportunity. Again, not so much a problem for you guys in Northern Europe and the colder climes, but down here we tend to suffer from kite degradation. It degrades the colours, it also degrades the materials. Okay, so that's another one. The third one is sand. Now sand is obviously an inherent part of the sport in most locations. If you're lucky enough to pump up on grass, I envy you. But sand is something the rest of us have to live with. Now, there's a couple of schools of thought on this. A lot of people say, put your kite away as sand-free as possible. I would agree with that. However, what I see most people doing to get the sand off is they're brushing the kite. Now, if you think about what you're doing here, you're just basically taking a piece of sandpaper and scrubbing your kite with the sandpaper. So in this case, I would argue that you're better off leaving the sand on than trying to scrub the sand off. What you should be doing is tapping the sand off. So you're hitting the kite, you're pumping the kite, not too hard, obviously you don't want to put a hole in it, but that's knocking the sand off rather than scraping the sand off. Okay, so if you can do that, great. So what I normally do if the kites are wet and if it's a damp day, I'll beat the kites as much as I can and then just put them away with the rest of the sand on. Why? Because once it's in the bag and it's immobile, I would question how much damage that sand is going to do to the kite. Yeah, if the kite is moving, it's rubbing against itself, yeah, of course that sand is going to kill the kite. But once the kite is still, it's static and it's in storage, personally, I don't see that sand doing much damage. Maybe I'm wrong. If you've got some more experience on this, please give me a shout. I'm all ears. But that's my take on this, that you're better off leaving that bit of sand rather than religiously scrubbing it off. And then the next day, of course, when it's a dry day, take your kite out, get it out, dry it out, the sand will fall off naturally. And then you can put it away nice and clean, nice and dry. Okay. Also on this, another big question people ask, should I be washing my kite in fresh water? I again would argue not unless you can dry it 100%. The problem with fresh water is if there's any bit of damp left on the kite, mould will grow on that patch that's damp. And we've had it, we go to a lake every year, a freshwater lake. If we don't dry the kites off, come the morning, and it's literally overnight, come the morning we've got a brown patch of mildew, of mould growing on the kite, which isn't really a problem performance-wise, but it looks pretty minging. And it means when you come to sell your kite, especially if it's a lighter coloured kite, this is a white kite, why is it brown? Yeah, people don't want to spend as much money on it. So that's the major thing there. Salt water, yeah, the argument against salt water is like the sand. The salt water gets in the stitching, gets in the material, and when the kite rubs against each other, it degrades the material. Yep, it certainly does, but it prevents this mould from forming. Personally, I'm lazy. I can't be bothered doing this every day. We're also lucky enough that we go kiting nearly every day. So if it's sandy one day, if I wash it off, okay, cool, I'll get it out the next day and it's salty again. So for me, it's not really worth it. If I was putting my kites away for 6 months over the winter, I might think about doing this. Wash them off with fresh water, get them really, really dry, put them away nice and clean. Yeah, then it's worth it. But I certainly wouldn't be doing it every day if I was going to be kite surfing once a week, twice a week, whatever. I just don't think it's worth it for that. Final one on Kite Care, do not leave kites in the car. It's on display for robbers, which in a lot of places you go kite surfing can be a problem. The second one, the more important one, is your car is like a greenhouse and the valves are actually sealed onto the bladder with glue. So what happens is the kite heats up, the glue melts, you get a little, it breaks the seal of the valve, then when it cools down, the glue reseals and you've got a little leak coming out of your valve, which is very, very difficult to detect and a pain in the arse to fix. Okay, so don't leave your kites in a hot greenhouse sun place, okay? Hot greenhouse sun place, inside your car is what I'm talking about. Don't leave your kites in the car, in a hot place.